So I'm going to be showing you today how to make a thumb pot, which is probably the simplest method of making anything in clay. And then I'll be showing you how to put two thumb pots together and how you can make some more interesting objects. So anyway, before you begin, the kind of tools you need some, obviously you need some clay, you need a board to work on, you will need some kind of knife. The knives you will find quite sharp on here, a regular canteen knife will do. There's a knife like this, or that we have knives like that. It doesn't really matter which one you have, but it's unlikely that you'll have exactly the same one. Also you need a fork. You could actually do everything you need with pottery with a knife, fork and a spoon. So you may use one of those. And we particularly need a fork because it has a jagged edge. Or if you don't have a fork, try and choose a tool like this one that does have a jagged edge. So those are the different tools. You won't be using them all at the same time. You also need a sponge, and you should have a sponge that's damp, not wet, but is damp. It's always important to make sure that you keep your hands a little bit damp. You don't want them wet because that will make your clay go very sloppy. The only times you would use really wet hands to make something out of clay is when you are using throwing on a potter's wheel, which we'll talk about again. Also useful to have a damp cloth nearby. Okay, we've got two pieces of clay because you're going to be making two thumb pots and joining them together. So I'm just going to start off with one. Now, normally to prepare clay you would knead it thoroughly in a far larger piece like that, much as somebody would do with dough for bread or a pizza, to make sure that air bubbles are out of it. But the clay that we have, the way it's supplied, it usually doesn't need that. You'd only probably need to knead it in that kind of way if you were recycling. That means if you had some spare clay and you were putting it all together. So what you want to try and do is to make a nice smooth ball. And the best way to do that is by using your two hands and using the palms of your hands. Try not to push your fingers too far because you'll end up with finger indentations, and we don't really want that. So we spend a bit of time smoothing that off. Now, we are going to be making something that has a basic shape of an egg. So for example, if we look at this face, you can see that the basic shape of that is a little bit like an egg shape. So you can imagine the two things joined together. Now, you're probably wondering why we have to hollow this out. Well, if that was a solid piece of clay, even if you left it for months and months to dry out, when it was put in the kiln, which is the clay oven, which fires it, which makes it nice and solid, it would crack. So what we need to aim for is a thickness of our clay of between about 1 and 2 centimetres. So once, as I say, keep your hands nice. Once you have got, you could spend a little bit longer making this a nice smoother ball, working over any cracks you might find. Cradle the ball in the palm of your hand and then gently surround it. So the idea is I'm going to push my thumb in, and the clay, by surrounding it with my hand, the clay will not expand all over the place. So what I'm trying to do is to go to about, try and judge about 2 centimetres spare down there. Now these are called thumb pots that I'm going to make, or pinch pots, because what the action is, I'm either going to put my thumb inside and pinch my fingers towards it to make the walls thinner, or I'm going to put my fingers inside and work with my thumb on the outside. It's using that pinching action. So it's either often called a thumb pot or a pinch pot. So I'm just going to do that. I'm going to try, if possible, to keep my hand still and just try to turn the piece of clay. So you can see, you can imagine primitive man perhaps working in this way and then eventually figuring out, well, if I had something that spanned the clay around, it would be easier for me. So what I've started to do is just hollow it out. And I'm going to work from the lower part of the pot and work my way upwards. What I don't want to do, for our purposes of what we're going to make, is to make the top thin. I'm going to aim for the top to be a similar thickness to the rest of the pot. Okay? Now, you could carry on, and as I say, this is probably the simplest pot that man began making. You could carry on just with 1/2 to make a very nice pot. That's not what we're doing for this exercise, but as you can see here, this is a very basic pot. This has been made in this way. You see it's nice and even. This is a rice bowl. That's what ended up as a rice bowl. This is another sort of drinking container that's been glazed, and some others here. So you can see, by being very careful, you could make a very nice finish. This one's got a little bit more form, and as you can see, it's got a little rim at the bottom of the pot, like you see with professional pottery. That's called a foot. And this one is very beautiful, and this is very light. The person who made that spent an awfully long time thinning that out and making a beautiful bowl. So those are the possibilities of thumb pots. So for our purposes, we're going to make 2. So I'm going to hollow this out as much as I can, very, very carefully. And then I'm going to start on my other piece. As it happens, I have 2 pieces that are ready here. And what I've done to make the tops quite flat, they don't have to be perfectly even, as you can see with these, but make them as close as you can. Remember, the tops are not too thick, not too thin. And what I'm aiming to do with the 2 halves is try and make them a similar size. It doesn't matter if one's slightly bigger than the other, as you'll see in a minute. So what I'm doing for this is I'm gently tapping the tops down. And if the clay is a bit soft, it's better to keep them in that state for a little while until they harden before you join them together. So what then I need to do, the other thing I need to have in my equipment is some slip. Now slip, all slip is diluted, watered down clay that's been diluted with, as I say, with water, or you can use vinegar. Vinegar is particularly effective if you've got clay that's gone quite dry. The 2 halves parts have gone quite dry before you put them together, and vinegar is very good at helping them bond. So a little bit of that. So then I'm going to use my fork to score the top, basically make it rough, and I do it in a sort of crisscross way. Again, I'm not going to press too hard. I just want to make that surface quite rough. Say these kind of tools that we have, they have little serrated like teeth at the top, are just as effective. So it doesn't really matter which one you have. Clay, when it's damp, will stick together very, very easily. Like if I had to put these 2 balls of clay together, I do that, they've stuck together. But as they dried out, if that's all I had done, they would just fall apart. Okay, so it fools you, clays, but you've got to be very thorough when you join things together. So what we've what we try and remember is the scoring and the slipping. So